Welcome to Exceptional Leadership. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. Though my focus is primarily pointed to leadership at an organizational level, let me assure you, most of what I share will translate to almost any aspect of life. Just tweak the info to fit your leadership role. Because whether you approach my content as a corporate leader, middle manager, small business owner, entrepreneur, or as a family member or friend, you are influencing someone. The question is, are you influencing well, exceptionally well? So let's take courage, exercise wisdom, and humbly invest in the people we are called to influence. Join me on a quest, not for perfection, but absolutely for exceptional leadership. Well, listeners, I'm always excited when I can have a conversation with someone that I know has been in the trenches when it comes to leadership. This conversation we're going to have today is going to be with someone who understands it from a business perspective, but be prepared because we're also going to parlay into some things that impact our personal lives, but also how we conduct ourselves in our personal lives in turn impacts the world. And as you have heard me say before, we are constantly influencing people. They're watching us. They're listening to us. Sometimes they're mimicking us, and we want to hold ourselves to account. Are we setting an example that we would want other people to follow? So I'm going to welcome Rick Johnson to the show today, and we're going to dig into some of that information. Welcome, Rick.
Hi, Anita. Good talking to you.
Absolutely. Well, let's start out, Rick, and give our listeners a little bit of insight as to your experience as a leader in business and in the world.
That's kind of funny because I was actually just talking to somebody the other day about the fact that from a very early age on, I think I recognized that I didn't have any real marketable skills, so to speak. I wasn't mechanically inclined necessarily or anything like that. But what I did find early on is something that I could learn is leadership. Really spent a lot of time, reading books and following people that were successful leaders in the world. And that kind of translated after I got into the service. I worked for several different manufacturing companies, being like the plant manager, production managers, things like that. And then eventually started my own company as a environmental engineering firm, which I didn't really have any experience in. And I owned that for 16 years. And then 20 years ago, I became a speaker and author and have operated a nonprofit organization called Better Dads Ministry. So, I've kind of got some leadership experience with big companies, small companies, for hired employees and volunteers, which are a completely different animal to lead than paid employees are. So from a lot of different perspectives, I guess I've got some leadership experience and I would say relatively successful.
Well, it sounds to me like you have a lot of skills. One, you probably overlooked your own marketable attributes in having natural leadership abilities, because I'm sure you had a raw talent for that. It needed polishing, but it's probably something that was always there, but it was so close to you that you almost undervalued it, I'll say. But the other thing is that military experience. I know in my business coaching practice, there are several things that I've adopted from what the military does so well. One is I use a SWOT analysis, which originated in the U.S. military, but that's looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of an organization. But I also use that with leaders, and I've created an assessment form, if you will, and I encourage my leaders to do a SWOT analysis on themselves as a leader on a quarterly basis. And that's something I learned from the military.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
And I do after action reviews. I know that that's
Mm.
something that the military does often is
Hmm.
when they've underwent any kind of exercise, they'll do an after action review to look at that and say, okay, what worked? What do we need to continue or enhance? And
Mm.
what do we need to improve on or completely take out of the equation? So I love the fact that you had that basis because I think that's such a strong foundation to build on.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I never even recognized that. But yeah, absolutely.
Well, and you said, you were talking about you went into this business and you didn't have experience, but the fact is you had experience, but maybe didn't recognize it. So whether you were familiar with that particular industry or not, that you could learn, but
Mm.
you brought some really powerful skill sets to that
Mm.
business. And it's probably why you succeeded.
That's awesome. Are you coaching me?
Well, we'll call coaching
I'm getting
encouragement.
inspired already. So
Good. That's my goal in life is to inspire, encourage, and educate.
that's awesome.
So, in your years of leadership, and it sounds like though a lot of it, I want to go back to one other thing. The fact that you read books. I know
Hmm.
for myself, reading books has completely changed my life in positive ways. I tell people all the time that reading is my compulsion, writing is my obsession. We both
Mm.
are authors. And so, I've always got to be reading or writing something, but reading about leadership and learning from those who've went before, learning what worked, what didn't work has really helped set me ahead of so many others. And
Hmm.
so tell me, how far back did you start reading about leadership? Is that something you started when you were really young, or did you just only develop that interest when you were in a leadership position?
Well, I think I became a reader very early. And of course, because I'm male, it started out as comic books and sports stuff. But, I think even at that point, when you're reading about sports figures that you admire, they're certainly show leadership in their area of expertise. And even comic book heroes are showing leadership in different aspects of the storyline. So, I didn't start reading business leadership books until I started working for different companies. But I was pretty fortunate. Well, my background was one of, both of my mother and stepfather were alcoholics and very abusive. So didn't get a lot of positive feedback from there. But I was very lucky in the first job that I had in high school was working at an A&W restaurant. And the owner there really taught me, just through his actions alone, a lot of great leadership skills that I still rely on today regarding work ethic and organizational skills and different things like that. So, of course, when I got older, started reading a lot of John Maxwell. And because I coach basketball, I've always been a big fan of John Wooden, and he has some great leadership ideas. And
Sure.
I've just always kind of been interested in it because, again, like I said, that's always felt like something that I could capitalize on as opposed to trying to force myself into skills that I didn't really have or wasn't really excited about.
Absolutely. Well, and leaders shape lives. I love the fact that you had a leader when you were at a young age, and especially coming from a background where you weren't getting this at home, but you had someone who was willing to invest in you. And that's something I encourage the leaders that I work with and speak to. We do have an opportunity to shape lives, and we're going to shape them. We're going to influence them. But it is that challenge to influence exceptionally well. And it sounds like that this gentleman did that for you. And when we do it exceptionally well, then that torch is carried on for many years past and even beyond our own lives. And it becomes like a pebble tossed in a pond. There's a ripple effect that goes on and on and on, far beyond that first place of impact.
Absolutely. Well, and I think the key also is that he did not only invested in me, but he believed in me. And I think that was the first time I recognized in my life that somebody believed in me and thought that I had the skills to be able to become a manager or something like that. So,
So
but yeah, I tell groups of men all the time, look, people are watching you. You don't even know, but all the time people are watching you, and they're looking to see how you think, how you act, how you solve problems, how you face problems in the world, all the things like that. And so you're absolutely right. We're all influencing people all the time, and we don't even know that it's happening.
That's right. And I want to go back to something you just said, because this was a PowerPoint you just made. Often I have leaders who are asking me, how can we motivate our employees? How do we raise morale? How do we get them more engaged? You just hit on something that is so key. And that is the fact that when people feel like someone believes in them, that raises their energy. It boosts their enthusiasm, and it causes them to want to perform at a much higher level. And so just that simple thing of letting someone know that you believe in them, first off, looking for things in them to believe in. I believe everybody has some built-in positive traits, but not everyone comes from a place where someone identified that or help them recognize it in themselves. But if you as a leader can come along and do that for someone else, I'm telling you right now, there's no amount of money or compensation that is going to equate to the benefit that you're going to get when you just let someone know, I see this in you. I don't know whether you see this in yourself, but I see this in you, and you need to hone that. You need to invest in doing more of that or making it even better. But that's a skill that's special. It's unique. And I just want you to know that I see you and I admire that.
I have a perfect example of what that looks like. I coached high school basketball, junior high and high school basketball for about 15 years. And I coached girls for probably the last 8 or 10 years. And I had a team one year, just a great bunch of girls, and really liked coaching them. And none of them ever thought that they would ever go very far playing basketball. But we just were, and I really loved them. I did. And they knew it. And I was hard on them. I pushed them. But they knew I had their back, and they knew I cared for them. They exceeded way over what anybody ever thought they would do. And in fact, 3 of them went on to play college basketball who never thought that they ever would. A couple of years later, I had a team, and I was going through some grief issues and things like that, and just really didn't put that kind of energy and faith and belief into the girls. And I don't think that they knew that I cared about them at all, probably. And they underachieved a lot. So, I think that is a really powerful thing for somebody to believe in you. It certainly motivates you to achieve more than you could ever do it without it. And I think that's why wives that believe in their husbands are so important, for men to be able to go out and conquer their little corner of the world, if you will.
Absolutely. And for husbands to believe in their wives. And certainly there is a powerful agent in that belief. I know that for me, years ago, I had a boss when I was like maybe 20 years old when I went to work for this company. And I had a boss who, one, he believed in me and he let me know that, and he worked to help me hone those skills. But he also made a practice of using the terminology, I appreciate you, or I appreciate this. And I'm telling you, in my life prior to that, I cannot recall anyone ever having said to me that they appreciated me or appreciated a job I did. That man changed my life.
And I think, businesses are always, well, how do we retain employees? Let's give more money, more vacation, work. I think it's simpler than that. I think exactly the things you're talking about, being appreciated, knowing that they care for you, your leadership cares for you, that they have your back. Those kind of things are more important maybe than anything as far as keeping and motivating good employees.
Yes, I agree with you. I have lived it. I've seen it. I've taught it, and I've seen the results. The thing is, people will be much more prone to stay with an organization where they feel appreciated. They feel like they're able to utilize their natural abilities and skill sets, and that they are grown and enhanced. Then they will stay for money. And I have seen many fantastic employees stay with an organization when Other businesses are trying to woo them away and offering all kinds of large compensation packages and benefits and things like that. And that employees say, no, I'm happy right where I'm at. Or maybe they took it and they go to the other place and realize this compensation isn't worth it. I want to go back where I came from, and they do return.
Well, and if you've ever had to lead a group of volunteers, which I've had to do with the last 20 years with ministry, you're not paying them. They've got to believe in you and have faith in you and know that you care about them, or they're not going to continue to keep helping out and being of service. So
that's exactly right. People they're motivated by those things that are intrinsic, what I call soul deep desires and needs. And if you want to not only motivate people to stay, but motivate people to excel, you would be wise to tap into those intrinsic needs and desires that they have. So
that's a great point. Yeah.
So Rick, right now I am developing a management certification course. So this is for the newly hired, promoted, or motivated manager. So mostly I'm targeting like the middle management level. And I'm just thinking, with your experience, both in how you've educated yourself as well as application in the real world, if you were to be introduced to a newly hired, promoted, or motivated manager, what kind of advice would you give them? Like when you were young, what are some things that you wish someone would have told you when you were entering the world of leadership?
Yeah. And, and I was actively seeking mentors at that time and nobody I asked would do it, which was not a very good thing, I don't think. I mean, if somebody asks, I mentor young men all the time that ask me to. So
I think it's becoming a much more accepted practice. It's funny, people, even 15 years ago, I know it seemed like people were much more like keeping information close to the vest. They were territorial, possessive, and insecure about sharing information. But I think we're hopefully getting better about that.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, to your question, that's a great question. I think there's a couple of things that I've learned over the years. I don't know if anybody would have ever told me if it would have mattered, but I think the biggest thing is to not quit, particularly from an entrepreneurial perspective. I had one business that lasted 16 years and this one has lasted 20. So it's not because I'm smarter or better or, anything else. It's just the fact that I refuse to quit. So I think that's an important aspect to success, I guess, as a leader, maybe.
So, I want to camp on that for a second, Rick. I think tenacity and persistence absolutely are important leadership skills if we want to succeed. And it reminds me of a story that's actually related to my writing career, so you'll appreciate this. Back several years ago, I went to my very first writers conference. I was in New Mexico. I still can't remember whether it was the first or second session. It bugs me that I can't. But anyway, regardless, the speaker in that session made this statement at the opening. And they said, I don't mean to dishearten anyone, but I feel like I need to be honest with you. Only about 1% of aspiring authors succeed in getting published for a royalty house or a traditional publisher, not where you pay somebody else to publish your books, but where someone says, there's a great message here. The quality of writing is good. Everything aligns and we want to publish your book. And I remember sitting there. Remember, this is my very first writers conference. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, great. I've just dropped all this money. I took a week of vacation from my day job. I've had this dream in my heart ever since I was a child. I finally decided to act on it. And this is the message. And I remember sitting there and I even prayed about it. And I'm like, God, why am I here? What in the world? And then all of a sudden, this is the thought that crossed my mind. I thought to myself, you know what? I want to be one of the one. I want to be one of the 1% that succeeds at doing this. And I made that my mission. And actually later on, that speaker went on to say, now I want to clarify something for you. The reason that the percentage are so low for those who succeed is because most give up and quit.
Right.
They don't have the tenacity. They're not persistent. They don't continue to hone the craft so that they can reach that quality level and find the right audiences for their messages. And so when I left that conference, I actually had a very positive thing happen where a publisher asked for a proposal. And then I realized I didn't know how to write a book proposal. I knew how to write business proposals, but not book proposals. And I set a goal to read, I don't even know why this number, but I set a goal to read 100 books on the craft and business of writing. And I did that. It took me a little over 18 months. And when I was finished, I had 2 book proposals. And that's actually because I had that on the ready. I had done all the behind the scenes work. I was tenacious, persistent, didn't give up. Then I was prepared when our literary agent actually asked for a proposal. I had it to give, and it was of the quality that got attention and brought me to success.
It's great points.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's go back to that.
Being prepared when opportunity knocks, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, that's another good tip.
Before opportunity knocks, right?
For sure. That's a great point too. Oftentimes what I find with leaders, young leaders or newer leaders, I'll say, they often have this thing that is prone to human nature where we just kind of wait for an issue to arise, and then we hope we'll do the right thing or we'll make the right decision or be prepared. When in fact, if we would imagine and envision some of the potential problems that might occur, some of the conflicts that might arise, and we actually were to lay out a plan for how we would react, then we end up reacting better in the moment. Because most of the time, if we don't have a plan, it doesn't work.
Right. And you read 100 books, so you knew all there was to know probably about writing book proposals and writing and stuff like that. So, you were prepared when the opportunity presented itself.
I was. And the thing is, too, I did not just read books on how to write well or how to write book proposals. I also read books on the business of writing. So I also made sure that I balanced myself with a well-rounded education because I understood the importance of that because I did understand business. And I
wish I'd have done that. Because I'll tell you, publishing industry is a completely different animal than any of the other businesses that I've been involved in.
It certainly is. And yet as authors, we have the opportunity. We're leaders. When you write a book, so often you're seen as having a different level of credibility because so many people dream about writing, but so few actually follow through and execute on the dream.
No, everybody I talk to says they got a book idea. Everybody.
Yes. And you're probably like me. Lots of people have asked you to help them, but then so many, they have good intentions, I guess, but they don't follow through. And that's a good leadership trait. That's another thing. In my business coaching practice, Rick, I've identified 7 core, what I call invisible drains. I also call them the stealthy 7 because they're so sneaky. But the reason I call them invisible drains is these are issues that drain money, time, and energy from an organization and its people. And I began to recognize that anytime I went into any business, in any industry, that these 7 areas would always have issues. So here's what they are. They're unclear and inconsistent expectations. So expectations are what we think, right? Then it's unclear and inconsistent communication. So that's what we verbalize or we document. Then unclear and inconsistent processes. Oftentimes we don't really plan out or have a system. We just kind of slap a bunch of things against a wall and hope something sticks. Then it's training because you can have the best process in the world, but if you don't train on it and you don't train effectively, then you're still going to lose a lot of money, time, and energy through mistakes and errors and going down rabbit trails. And then it's customer care, accountability, and the last one is execution. And execution is the one that so often people will say to me, "Oh, Anita, I know that. I know." And my challenge in return to that is, well, tell me what you're doing with what you know. We can have great information, but if we're not acting on it, it's not doing us any good or the other people around us. So that's something that I would teach leaders, and I am teaching leaders. I'm developing all of this into the course that I'm creating. Is I want to teach leaders how to make sure that they are plugging those invisible drains and then preventing new ones from occurring from those sources.
That's great. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, it obviously is something I'm passionate about. So, do you have anything else that you would say to that new leader, that new manager?
Even if you can't find a mentor, I had some mentors that were like, I would call distant mentors.
Mm-hmm.
Like my first pastor was, and I became a Christian late in life. So, I had a lot of misperceptions about church from how I was raised. And it's to some degree, I think it felt a little unmanly
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective. But my first pastor was a former Green Beret and just a real man's man and just a powerful speaker, wrote a bunch of great books on character and male leadership. And it really is one of the reasons I do what I do right now is through his influence. And I don't think I ever talked to him, but he was a huge mentor in my life and teaching me so much different things that I had never thought of or believed or anything else before. That, again, to your point, people are watching you all the time, and how are you influencing them? Are you influencing to become an author and speaker that reaches hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people through their work, or are you influencing people to take drugs and pass on generational legacies that are unhealthy for people and families?
That's exactly right. And I love that term, distant mentorship. I think that's fantastic. So as you were sharing there, I want to switch gears a little bit, because one thing I know about you, Rick, is that you are a grandparent who has experience in raising your grandchild. And so in parenting and grandparenting, talk about influence. And talk about the necessity to be intentional to influence exceptionally well. Because here's the thing. We are shaping lives that are going to go out into the world, and they're going to pass on a lot of what we've instilled into them. And so let's talk about your grandchild. So as you consider the fact that this grandchild is going to become an adult who goes into the world, and they're going to be leading people, what are some of those qualities and ethics and traits that you are trying to instill so they can be a good contributing member of society?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we have been very intentional about helping her to become independent at an early age. Both of her parents, our son passed away about 6 years ago, so he's not available, and the mother was diagnosed with a very dangerous mental illness, so she's not in the picture. And we're not the youngest the youngest people ever, and who knows, someday we could both be gone, and I'd hate to have her be 16, 17 years old and not have the skills to be able to take care of herself in the world. So we've been very intentional about trying to teach that aspect. I don't know that has much to do with leadership, but
I think it has everything to do with leadership, Rick. I mean, we as leaders, we have to be able to have independent thinking. We have to sometimes stand on our own 2 feet because other people are looking to us for direction. So I think it's very relevant, the things that you would be teaching her as far as her being able to take care of herself, because leaders have to take care of themselves, because so often the buck does stop with them. They don't have anybody else to go to.
Right.
And then other people are looking to them to say, okay, where are we following you? How are we going to approach this? What do we do, leader? So what are some of those things that you have taught her or are teaching her to prepare her for that time? Then she's going to be standing on her own 2 feet.
Well, it's kind of a popular meme, I think, on Facebook, but I saw it and I really took it to heart because, I suspect my ministry's kind of winding down now. We moved from Oregon to Texas last year, and COVID really kind of killed my speaking platform. And, this latest book that I've got coming out just kind of came out of nowhere. So, but I saw a thing that said, maybe your ministry isn't what you do, but who you raise. And I've kind of taken that to heart, and I really try to give her a vision of the fact that she's special and that the things that have happened in her life happened for a reason, and that she can use those for motivation and to make a difference in the world, or she can use them to hold herself back. And so, just that vision that she's special and that God's got a plan for her life in the world, I think is it's interesting because she's 9, she's going to be 10 pretty quick, but she already has a vision that she wants to be a pediatrician doctor. And she knows what college she wants to go to, and she tells me that she'll be done with her residency when she's 29 years old.
Wow.
So I'm like, how old are you? You have this plan and this vision. I'm like, I was 25. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, So it's kind of an interesting process.
Well, and talk about influence, from that kind of position, when she achieves that, she's going to be shaping other lives and making a massive difference. And so everything, it's obvious even right now that you are making a difference for her, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I love the fact that she is taking it to heart. She's being teachable. Being teachable is one of those traits that leaders need to have.
That's huge trait.
Yeah. I mean, if we always think we already know and we're blocking people out, and if it's not our idea, it's not a good idea, we're setting ourselves up for disaster. That's not going to turn out well.
Well, and I met so many, a lot of our clients when I owned the environmental engineering firm were real estate developers, bank presidents, attorneys, people that are used to when they say something, people automatically do whatever they tell them to do. And here was a topic, they might have a contaminated property or something like that they really don't know anything about. They weren't real happy about that. You'd have to be very, what's the word I want to use? Strategic on how you explain to them what needed to be done and why, so that they could understand it. Otherwise, they had all these crazy ideas about what they thought should be done.
That is so true. So true. Okay, so Rick, you mentioned your book. So I want to tell our listeners what the title is, but I just want to say this. There is so much in this book that is applicable to leadership. And I want to read just a little excerpt and give our readers or our listeners an example of why I think they should read your book. So the title of the book is When Grandparents Become Parents, How to Succeed at Raising Your Children's Children. I love it. I've been in this position. It's so, so good. I only wish you would have written this book at least 5 years ago.
Well, how interesting, because my publisher at the time, about 10 years ago, said, Rick, what do you think about writing a book on grandparents raising grandchildren? I said, well, first of all, I'm not a grandparent. And second of all, my grandchildren will never live with me. And so, funny how God works, right? Never use the word never.
Well, that's another good leadership tip. Never say never in leadership and
that's
in life.
Right. And never burn bridges. I have, and my wife said, well, I can't believe you're still, why didn't you tell them what you think? And it's like, I've just always made it a practice never to burn bridges, and things have come back so many times and been profitable and things like that, so I think that's a good principle too for leaders.
Absolutely. Well, I know in your book, because I bought an advanced copy and I'm so happy that I did, you talk a lot about boundaries and discipline and things that are, again, very crucial to leadership. But on page 99, and I love this, you've got a little box and you've got these scattered throughout the book, and there's so many good bits of information in there. But this one is tips for teaching self-discipline. And listener, I want you to really pay close attention to what Rick says and think about how this is applicable to leadership. So you say on page 99, Rick, teach children to be grateful, not entitled. Teaching them to say please and thank you develops gratefulness. Also, giving thanks in prayer models a grateful attitude and helps them develop it. Here's the thing. First off, we have to exemplify this because it's not enough to try to teach other people to have gratitude. We have to express gratitude ourselves.
Right.
And we have to show that we are not entitled. And I hear a lot from leaders about the entitlement mentality of employees these days. But here's the thing. We spend so much time complaining and blaming that we don't really slow down and think, maybe they just haven't been taught differently. Maybe they didn't see a different model. And you could be the person like that owner of the A&W restaurant all those years ago. You could be that person who is helping to reframe their thinking and change the mindset so they can in turn be more effective and change lives. So I love that. Then this one, massive. Teach them to control their emotions. Teach them the value of focusing on positive emotions like love, hope, and faith instead of being mastered by negative emotions such as jealousy, hatred, and greed. If that is not applicable in the workplace, I don't know what is. And so often in leadership, employees will constantly, or even volunteers, like you said, there are volunteer settings, but they're constantly bringing problems to you, right? You're the leader, the buck does stop with you, and everybody thinks you should be the problem solver. But if you can, first off, teach people to transition from thinking in doomsday and naysaying ways, but really to start saying, how can I turn the problem upside down? This is something I teach. It's something I live by. I challenge myself. How can I turn the problem upside down? How can I make it a 180 of what it is right now? And just by that philosophy alone, it's amazing what creative solutions it often brings to mind. But I can teach that to others.
One of the things that we have really worked on with our granddaughter is to teach her not to use the word can't. Can't shouldn't even be in her vocabulary. And we catch her on it every time she says it. She doesn't say it much anymore now, but when she was younger, she did quite a bit. And I think that's important. Again, that's talks to not quitting and not self-sabotaging yourself, which I think a lot of people do.
Absolutely. And when we self-sabotage, one, it's usually a subconscious thing. We're not even aware that we're doing it, but
Absolutely.
It is also something we carry into every part of our lives, professionally and personally. So that is so good.
You see people all the time with it's like, wow, they have the worst luck of anybody I've ever seen. It's like, no, it's those tiny little micro decisions that they're making every day in their lives that are causing bad things to happen.
Oh, okay. So that's another good point you just made. Paying attention to our micro decisions. It's not just the big choices that we're making, but what are the small decisions that we're making throughout our day? And if you're not getting the results that you want, then actually make it a habit to start documenting some of those micro decisions and then look at the pattern, because a pattern will emerge. You will begin to see why some of the things are happening, and that will help you determine the why behind your what.
Well, and that's one of the things that I teach young men that I mentor is that, everybody can do the big things right. It's those little things that other people don't do or don't want to do that you need to be aware of and work at. And that's what's going to help make you successful.
Exactly. And usually it is the accumulating effect of little things that either drive success or failure.
Absolutely.
So love that. Okay. Your third bullet point on page 99. Teach them to manage their time effectively. This will benefit them greatly throughout their life. Almost all successful people organize their time well. Such a good point. Time management, there's a reason that is an evergreen topic when it comes to business conferences and trainings and so forth, because time management is a chronic issue and it bites hard. I always tell people, I work from what I call a preventables method. So I prevent and take care of everything I can in as timely a manner as possible, because the unpreventable is going to happen to me. No question. But if I haven't not dealt with my preventables in a timely manner, then when the unpreventable happens, I'm dealing with a multiplicity of issues when I could have only had to focus on that thing that I couldn't prevent.
No, and that's absolutely true.
Yep. I love that. And then this last one that you have on page 99 of When Grandparents Become Parents. Teach them the benefits of delayed gratification. Our culture promotes instant gratification, which leads to a host of problems, including indebtedness, lack of flexibility, and choices in life, and not being able to take advantage of opportunities when they become available. That is so relevant to business and organizational cultures and missions, Rick. And I love that you included that in here. I have a saying I repeat to myself sometimes. Don't sacrifice what you really want on the altar of immediate gratification. And I think that in business, many times we're looking for that easy button, the thing that's going to make us feel most comfortable in the moment. And then we get ourselves in trouble.
And I've done that before. But here's something that really kind of struck me. I think it was the last big recession we had, which was when, 2008 or something.
Yes.
And I really paid attention to, people were selling awesome high ticket items for really low prices. And the people that were able to take advantage of that were the people that had money.
Yes.
And they had money because they hadn't been wasting it, on little things for instant gratification. And I really started paying attention to that. And so we've kind of done that now, and we've gotten a number of really good deals on stuff just because we had the cash available to be able to take advantage of those opportunities when we came upon them. And that's something that we've been trying to teach our granddaughter too. And she's finally starting to save her chore money and money she gets from birthdays and stuff like that instead of spending it on candy or something the minute she gets it. So it's a good thing.
It is good. And I think oftentimes we don't even pay attention to what we're spending on for immediate gratification. And expense it's not only in monetary form, although yes, that is a patterned problem for a lot of people, but we also spend time and energy on instant gratification where we could invest that time and energy on something that's actually going to get us what we really want.
That's a good point.
Yeah, very true. Well, Rick, this has been such a joy. I have really gleaned a lot from you. It's so funny. You have such a humble spirit, and you don't, I think, sometimes necessarily see how much exceptional leadership you offer others just by your very simple, clear, but truthful and powerful statements. And I just want to encourage you to continue to do that because, yes, you are raising a leader in your home, but you're also raising leaders through the books that you write. And I certainly hope you have more speaking engagements because you have a lot to offer. And I just want to say, keep making that difference because people need to hear from people like you.
Well, thanks, Anita. I appreciate that. It's always nice to hear that, especially from a peer. So I appreciate you saying that.
Well, I don't say it if it isn't the truth. And listener, for you, I just want to remind you that you have an opportunity to lead exceptionally well every day. Fill your mind with good books. I highly encourage you to get Rick's book. I don't care if you're not even a parent yet. When Grandparents Become Parents, How to Succeed at Raising Your Children's Children is relevant if you have any type of leadership role. I hear this all the time from leaders. I feel like I'm more of a glorified babysitter. Well, here's the thing. You can complain about that, or you can embrace the fact that you have an opportunity to shape lives in a more positive way. So fill your mind with the type of information that Rick offers in this book that can help you make the difference that you were made for. And Rick, before I forget, how can our listeners find out more about you and some of the other resources that you have to offer?
Sure. They can go to our website at betterdads.net. Any books that they buy on there, I'd be happy to sign for them. So
Fantastic.
They can get a hold of me through that and everything else. So.
Okay. And your books are available at all major bookstores and online, I'm sure?
Yeah, certainly on Amazon. The new one will be in bookstores. I don't know how many of the older ones that I've written are still in bookstores, but they have been, yeah.
Okay. Well, and betterdads.net can get them access to any of your books, so that's fantastic. I know
books, tapes, whatever.
Okay, perfect. And I know you're a wealth of information, and if you are that newer leader out there, let someone like Rick be your distanced mentor. You may not have access to sit across the table with him, but you can listen to him. You can learn from him by going to these ready resources that he has put out into the world. I promise you, you're not going to regret it. And remember, as always, you have a choice as you go throughout your life. You're going to lead someone, so why not lead exceptionally well? Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Anita Brooks. And I just want to remind you of a truth. If you are not leading at the level that you want to be at, remember, it is never too late for a fresh start with fresh faith. You can start today. You can start making a difference. You can help the world become a better place. You can begin to lead with intent. Your family, your friends, the people you work with, your community, in your church, in our nation, across the planet. Whatever opportunities come your way, remember that did not happen by accident. And by stepping up and leading exceptionally well, you will help fulfill the purpose you were created for.